Notion has made it very easy to create something that is aesthetically pleasing, then to use, but then also to share. But then duplicating, you can duplicate a Notion page with one click into your workspace and make use of that page right away. And that's how it's spreading as wildfire. People are just enjoying sharing the product because it's so easy. And then, given that it's a PLG motion or product-led growth, right? An individual user gets a Notion link, then they start using Notion personally, and then they recommend it to their business. It's like, I guess the customer journey is sort of very organic in that fashion. Notion is one of the best exemplifications of that strategy.
Hi, and welcome to Minimum Viable Podcast, where we go beyond the surface to explore the depths of product creation. Think of this as a masterclass in innovation, combining deep insights, perspectives, hands-on analysis, where we'll cover topics like the psychology of user behavior and the aesthetics of design and the timeless principles of storytelling. I'm your host, Elliot Popple, and the founder of General Collaboration. General Collaboration is a cross-app inbox for all of your comments from all of the tools that you use at work. So that way, you'll always be focused on what needs your attention most. Without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. Hey, Tem. Thank you so much for joining today on the podcast. Let's try to think back to how we met. I think we're just like classic internet friends. And thankfully, or interestingly enough, as you can see by your background, we both wound up being in the same city. So internet friends turned to real friends. We met in the earliest days of GC, and you were really helpful in terms of me thinking through how we were going to approach community and engaging our users, engaging our power users with GC. And now that's turned into a friendship where we played some poker, we played some Catan. You've been traveling for a little while. Pumped to see that you're back in New York. Pumped to have you on the podcast. Thanks so much for joining today.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. Honored to be one of the first guests. Yes, internet friends. I'm not sure if it was Twitter, X, or one of those, maybe even Slack. Oh, I think Lenny Slack, maybe, actually.
I think you're right.
I've even more a bit unique. I mean, I think a lot of people meet through Twitter, but not a lot of people meet through Slack and really, I think, make genuine connections. So excited to see what's to come. And GC, I think, is a, first of all, cool name. Sounds cool. But I think it solves a real problem out there. So excited to maybe touch on that here.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining. So I'd love to get started. I know you as Tem, the Notion ambassador, Tem of Optemization. We'll talk about your company too, but would love to hear what's your origin story? I know you're kind of one of these New York entrepreneur types, NYU student, had a startup earlier, I think while you were at NYU, did some stuff with Techstars. Tell me how you got to now. Bring me all the way back.
Let's start in 1995. No, just kidding. That is the year I was born. But really, I think things really in this particular angle started when I got to NYU. That was 2015. So quick relevant background is that my dad is an entrepreneur, not a tech entrepreneur, but entrepreneur. My mom also had a gift shop at some point. My brother right now is an entrepreneur. He runs a few dental clinics back home. I'm from Kazakhstan. So it's in the blood, I suppose. And when I got to NYU, I got mixed in right away with the entrepreneurship crowd. NYU has a fantastic entrepreneurial center. It's called the Leslie E Lab. And so on day one, I got involved and I wanted to start the company, or not even I wanted to, I did try starting a company, and it was very different from what I do now. And it was very purposeful. I want to say it's almost this romanticized version of entrepreneurship where you're like, I want to build something and therefore I'm going to get trained in the building of it and go read Lean Startup and then understand what customer discovery is and come up with hypotheses and put them on the canvas and post-it notes and do this, all this methodological stuff, which works out, I think, for it can work, but it's also
it's a very classic first-time founder approach for sure.
But potentially, especially in the academic circles. But I think what entrepreneurs learn eventually is it's so much about luck. It's so much about timing. It's so much about making the right connection or, accidentally, I kid you not, we're about to close a customer who was referred to me by someone who I met in a steam room in London in Equinox. Sometimes this just happens and it's completely you can call it engineered serendipity, because I did make it a point to introduce myself and go to like a club that may attract users like people like this. So
Introducing yourself to people at the steam room is that's a very ballsy move. I'm kind of one of those staring at my feet, don't make eye contact with me people, but you're a hustler. You're like you said, entrepreneurship is clearly in your DNA.
yeah, so just to bridge the gap here, or really to answer your question, I started my first company at NYU. It was a fitness technology business. The idea was to essentially build something like Fitbit or Whoop, but specifically for the weightlifting use case. So the idea is that you go to the gym, you work out, you lift weights, and then you walk away with your data automatically quantified. So all the exercises you did, all the reps, all the sets, the rest times, the velocities, even the
Oh,
form correctness and all of that stuff. And it's a problem that's still unsolved, but it's not really that of an important problem, I think, for people. There's a really large market risk where market doesn't really give a shit. Give a crap.
you can say shit here.
So
This isn't cable TV.
yeah. It doesn't give a shit. And so, two things I think usually it's like when looking at opportunity, there's market risk, which was pretty high for this opportunity, but also execution risk, which was like through the roof. Like I was a freshman, I did not know anything about anything besides had some charisma, some hustle, and I'd watch Gary Vee on the side, right? So, and me trying to build a hardware product that involved software and data science, before LLMs and all of that stuff, it did not work out. That was lack of skills and lack of, I think, of a opportunity that really propelled itself forward.
So how did this lead to you getting your role at Techstars? Because that was what came next, right?
Yes, the me getting involved with, or me trying to build that company got me involved with the entrepreneurship community, and I participated in this pitch competition that I loved being a part of, but I thought it could be organized way better. So over the next couple of years, I became the president of this organization, and what I did was strategically invite people to be judges at pitch events, as well as mentors and workshop presenters, and I would pick the people that I want to be connected with. So I would invite them and make a good impression on them, and create a relationship. So one of those people was at the time the MD of Techstars New York, Jenny Fielding. So I invited her. She was a judge. She had a good time. And then a year later, I emailed her as looking for opportunities, and that's how the Techstars internship came to be.
Okay. And then it was around this time that you stumbled upon somehow you fell in love with Notion. Now you are the reason we got connected is I was interested in community and you were kind of one of the OG Notion ambassadors and full on, like dare I say, member of the Notion cult. I think you even had a tattoo of the logo at one time. Is that right?
I do. I do. Again.
Still have it.
Kind of hard to
That's
see.
nuts.
Hard to see. Oh,
That
right
is
there.
that's incredible. So you're at Techstars, and is that when you came across Notion? How did that jump take place?
Techstars internship was in 2019. By the way, at the same time, I was interning at two other accelerators, or sort of like entrepreneurial things. So that's important because I came across Notion when I was organizing or managing the entrepreneurship club as the president, and like I had actually a few leadership positions, and my expression of leadership, that's including the failed startup, was not anything like management wise, because I didn't know how to manage people, but I knew that I had a intrinsic desire to be like organized and to be like type A, and to use tools to increase like the efficiency or effectiveness of getting things done, right? I didn't even read that book. I didn't know it existed, but I
Mhm.
was myself exploring and trying and using tools. Like I remember seeing a blog post about Trello, and I was like, whoa, this is interesting. That's 2015, by the way. And so
Okay.
I went through, and I want to say like mastered and eventually churned through Trello, Asana, Airtable, a bunch of tools in between. And so that led me to this world of productivity tools.
Mhm.
And then there was a point where I was like the local NYU go-to person for tooling, especially for Airtable and Zapier.
Mhm.
Um, And then in 2018, I think I was just browsing Product Hunt. Maybe I was searching for something, but I find Notion on Product Hunt, and it's like has a couple thousand upvotes. Immediately gets my attention. I try it out, and that's how I found Notion. To answer your question,
Okay. And then
or
and then
part of
from
your
there
question.
you're hooked. So let's actually take it a step back. I didn't realize how many tools you had played around, but then I guess that was more this wasn't as an ambassador or anything like that. You were just a big tool guy. Tell me about your process for finding tools, evaluating tools, selecting tools. How did you go through these other tools en route to falling in love with Notion the way you have?
At that time, there was no process. It was very much driven by enthusiasm, and I think some kind of uh, understanding that just using a spreadsheet or Excel or whatever was just not good enough. And when I tried to remember Airtable for the first time, for me, the fact that there was now filters and sorts and grouping and relations and all of this, I thought it was like, how can one not use it? It's so powerful. It makes so much sense. So for me, it was like just discovery of novel features and then an understanding of how these features are actually a way to get work and individual work done faster and more productively, but then also collaborate with others faster and more productively.
So it sounds like most of your process for choosing tools, you were quick to hire, and also it sounds like relatively quick to fire. So maybe the analysis of these tools kind of took place on the back end when you said Trello's not for me anymore. Onto Airtable, Airtable's not for me anymore. Onto Notion or whatever the sequence was. What was it that you were you running to a new tool? Were you running away from an old tool? What led to those
Mm.
changes?
It was very intuitive, but I will say let's focus specifically on Notion, right? Because that's where my life revolves right now. When I discovered Notion, I don't necessarily remember feeling that like, oh, I've realized that I can take bits of Airtable, bits of Google Docs, bits of Google Drive, and put it in one place. That epiphany did come, but a little bit later. I think there was a period where I stared at blank Notion for maybe around 2 3 days, and I was like, I know I want to use this, but I don't know how. And I just kept researching and looking through things. And there was no resources at the time, no YouTube videos, no Facebook, no nothing, no free templates, no steal this template for $0 on Twitter that get thousands of likes. That did not exist. None of that existed, right? So I had to figure this out. And I think what's kept me around was just the aesthetics, the brand of it, like the story. I think right around that time, Hidden Shah has posted the story about Notion and how they ran out of business, ran out of money, fired everyone, moved to Japan, rebuilt the product, and I had probably read it at that time, and I was like, "Whoa, this story is captivating. I think there's something there. Plus, the aesthetics of the product are quite cool. So let me figure this out."
Tell me more about that because it really is I mean, a cult like following as evidenced by your tattoo that you've got there. Tell me more about like what about the brand, the aesthetics, the story pulled you in, and what do you think helped build the community around Notion the way it did from those early days? Because like you said, there were no templates back when you found them. How did that flywheel start?
Notion is generally deemed to be unopinionated in the Twitter, Twitter tech Twitter, I want to say, but actually, I think it has certain very specific opinions that almost kind of blend into the background, and I think that was quite attractive. So, first of all, I will say that I find opinionated people quite interesting, and I am myself not one to have that many strong opinions. And so, with Notion, some of those opinions were expressed on the product design level, right? So it's only like, was it 9 or 10 colors still to this day, right? And then when you add emojis to the page icons, right, they really committed to that, even though it could be silly in a professional setting. And then when you start pulling up the cover photos, the options include like natural history, NASA archives. And I was like, these sort of um, opinions, or rather taste in the product, was quite evident from the very beginning, and that was attractive to me. And I was like, "Whoa, this is interesting to investigate, to understand, to lean into." Right. So that's on the product level, but on the community level, It's a whole another thing. Of course, it's sort of it's a reinforcing type of mechanism. But let me tell you about the community. Around the time where I started becoming a power user, so into like maybe mid 2018, communities around Notion started popping up around the world and around the internet. All of a sudden, there's a Discord server, there's a Slack channel, there's a subreddit, there is a Facebook group, and it's all different people coming together almost simultaneously to not only like celebrate and nerd out about the product, but it's like share their setups and feel a sense of pride and excitement to share how they have used the tool. And that is lightning in a lightning in a lightning in a bottleneck. Like it's so rare, I think, that type of movement that emerged, and it was very organic. And then if you stop me anytime if you wanna interject with a question, but then they took that very organic movement and started molding it and started shaping it into empowering it. They started like propelling it forward themselves. So that can be exemplified in one person who right now is trending on Twitter as it relates to Notion is Ben Lang. So Mr. Ben Lang, he created the first sort of Notion, one of the first Notion related products, and it was called notiontemplates.com. And I believe that's one of the first template galleries ever before Notion even had their own template gallery. And so that obviously landed in the radar of the Notion founding team. There were probably like less than 10, 12 people at that time. They hired Ben, and Ben became the first community leader. And so then what Ben did, he offered like reimbursements to community leaders to host events and keep doing that. And then he himself hosted a few events. And the second ever event run by Notion in New York, I ended up presenting a template walkthrough on that event. And me interacting with Ben, me interacting with the Notion people, and as well as the product, just kept me bringing into that that community, which could be called a cult, I suppose. So that was the very beginning. That was still 2018.
So, reflecting on your experience in Notion's rise and the building of the community around Notion, what do you think product leaders at other companies can learn from this?
I think within between the lines of the story, there is an element that's missing that could be explicitly like pointed out is the virality potential of the product, right? So Notion has made it very easy to create something that is aesthetically pleasing, to create and to use, but then also to share, right? So before they changed the share menu recently, the making a Notion page public was like 2 clicks, right? So now you have something that is let's just call it worth sharing it and easy to share. And that's how it started spreading as wildfire. Now people are just enjoying sharing the product because it's so easy. And then given that it's a PLG motion or product led growth, right? An individual user gets the thing, gets a Notion link, then they start using Notion personally, and then they recommend it to their business. It's like the work, not workflow, I guess, the customer journey. If the customer is the business, it's sort of very organic in that fashion. I'm sure your listeners probably know PLG way better than I do, but I think Notion is one of the best exemplifications of that strategy. So just to recap, what they made very effective, or what really worked for them, is the ability to share a Notion page so easily. And sorry, I'm missing the other part of it. Sharing is one thing, but then duplicating is another thing. You can duplicate a Notion page with one click into your workspace and make use of that page right away.
Was that ever hard, or was that like which came first, the shareability, that PLG motion, or the community or cult?
I don't. This is chicken and egg. I don't know which one came. Oh no, I think the community it emerged first, and
Okay.
then I think the shareability was always there, I know that the template gallery came later. Shareability and duplication was always there as long as I remember, but the curation and the uh, curation is what I mean by that is like the template gallery that came later. Um, but then the monetization is a whole other thing that emerged that poured gasoline on this even further.
So I'd love to hear a bit about optimization and specifically the specialization you have had in helping support remote teams. You started it around the time that the pandemic was, I don't know, here to stay. Is that right?
I announced the web, or I published the website in March, maybe 15th, 2020. So right about the time where lockdowns were announced.
So you couldn't have had that timing any better as far as launching your business. Would love to hear. Tell me about how do you think Notion and how do you specifically support remote teams? What do you think you need to get right to support a remote team?
Let me just quickly also back up for context, right? Optimization, as defined right now, is a consultancy firm that helps the adoption of Notion as a digital workspace. So specifically, the last two words are important because a lot of folks out there use Notion as a personal note taking tool or habit tracker, or maybe even for knowledge bases and wikis. But we specifically take the angle where it can be like a centralized effective source of truth and therefore an operating system for an entire organization.
And that's the specific flavor, back to that point of this community that's creating templates. That's your template, is too simple of a word for what you're creating, but that's your flavor of template that you're able to deliver to your customers, to the companies that use optimization. Is that right?
Template is not even the right word. It's
Right.
it's
It's way
more
bigger.
like the foundational idea. Like, yeah, sometimes we find ourselves making templates, right, for specific use cases, but a lot of the time it's like there's three phases to adopting, I think, any software, right? It's like evaluation, deployment, and maintenance. And so we support our customers across that life cycle, right? So evaluation is super important. It's like figuring out what are the workflow requirements, why are these the requirements, what makes a workflow effective, and is Notion the right solution, or maybe there's another tool. We work with other tools, but Notion is our primary focus. And then implementation is like, okay, you can use the tool in a very like simplistic way, and sometimes that's the right way, but a lot of the times you have to think through a more complex implementation and do it while you're if you're founder running the business, or if you're lead, you're running the team, like you don't have that bandwidth or capacity to figure out the best implementation. So we help with the best practices, right? In a fraction of the time that it takes someone to like research and learn and master the skill. And then of course implementation is like once you figured out that you can apply this, and then you do apply this, but the question is like how do you make it last over time? So that's where maintenance comes in. But that's just a bit more about our work.
So it sounds like what you deliver is pretty customized to each individual client, each individual business that you work with. And if I'm hearing you right, a bit of pattern matching of you've got this arsenal of workflows, of templates, of ways people can use Notion that you're pattern matching against. This remote business is operating in this way, and I can apply X, Y, and Z workflows to help them work efficiently using Notion and whatever other apps you bring in. Does that sound about right?
Sounds about right. I will say that the arsenal isn't just the assets, right, in terms of like the templates or the workflows, but it's also the right questions to ask in terms of, we think of our work, and I mentioned those three phases, right? Evaluation, deployment, implementation. But there's sort of three types of work that we match to those: design, development, documentation. So with design, it's like figuring out, design, putting your design thinking hat on. Really, we try to wear it all the time, but asking the right questions in terms of like evaluating a workflow and then designing for the needs that we figure out.
I'd love to hear a bit about the onboarding phase of when you figured out your approach, or at least you figured out your initial approach, and you're helping a company bring on people to use their instance of Notion for the first time. How do you onboard teammates? And even thinking like, how have you onboarded your own teammates? Because you're a startup using Notion in your own ways as well.
Can we put a pin in that? And I actually want to go back to the question that you had about how we support remote teams or something like that, because I think it connects the dots nicely. Um, so just one example, like I mentioned the implementation phases, I mentioned the types of work. So something that we've done on a number of projects with our customers is like implement a uh, sort of a hybrid between a company newsfeed, company forum, company bulletin board, but really a way to communicate one to many in a way that is more effective than a all hands on Zoom or a at everyone on Slack. So the way that this takes shapes on the design phase is, meeting with leadership or with C-suite or with leads that want to make these announcements and trying to understand like what's important in the announcements. Is it actionable? Is it just FYI? Are the assets that you want to like attach this? How do you want to broadcast it, and so on? And generally, it takes in some shape. Then in development, it's a Notion database that has a number of different announcement templates that then is one click loaded, where the person writes out the communication, generally attaches a Loom video on that walking through the announcement, and then has a actionable section at the bottom where an action is actually tracked from announcement to getting it done. So that's sort of an example that we've implemented several times for remote teams specifically because they don't have someone coming up in the office and be like, in the mic announcing it for everyone, or even a speakerphone, right? They need an analogy to this, but things get lost in Zoom or forgotten. Things get lost in Slack. Things get lost in other mediums, but they tend to stick around or have a longer half life of information in the digital headquarters or the operating system, because in Notion, content is if done right, it can be surfaced and resurfaced in the right context. Hope that made sense.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely makes sense. One thing I'd love to ask you about is AI. Obviously, Notion has made a push into AI. Probably every other for work tool has made a push into AI. I have to admit, I'm a little bit skeptic of some of the ways that I'm seeing AI being implemented, and I'd love to get your take. I think what scares me looking at, say, I don't know, Notion's implementation or many implementations is I can use the AI in Notion to write an entire doc, and then my teammate can use AI to summarize that entire doc. Where's the value in that? I'm sure there's some interesting ways that you're using AI, or maybe you're a skeptic like me too. Would love to hear how you're helping teams use AI.
I'm a skeptic turned convert, I want to say.
Okay. Okay, convert me. Let's
Yeah,
hear it.
yeah. I mean, I will say for a while when I saw ChatGPT take off and then all the other things on top of ChatGPT, actually, one of our customers was Copy.ai, which was like super
Oh wow.
early. They
Yeah.
were a GPT-3 wrapper way back when. So, and I was like, I sort of get it, but it's just it doesn't really work that well and so on. But for me, the big breakthrough as it relates to ChatGPT at least was the audio conversation feature on the app. It's like a real conversation, and I think it answers questions very well. And sometimes even before they changed it, it could keep up a dialogue with you, which I thought was like that novel feeling that kept me coming back for questions and for answers rather, right? So that's in relation to ChatGPT. With Notion AI, I will say also I did not feel like I was getting much value from it. I remember one distinct time where it clicked for me, where I was creating a list for productivity frameworks, and I knew that I don't know what I don't know, but the AI knows. So I kept prompting it and asking like, what are other productivity systems and frameworks? And it just listed a lot more than I knew. And I also discovered some stuff like I did not know that Inbox Zero is a framework that was first captured in a book. I unfortunately did not read that book, but that was like a novel finding, right? And then there was a lot of other frameworks that the AI brought in because it had that knowledge. So I thought that was valuable. So I think when it comes to discovering like tangential knowledge through, more effective, more productive research. I think that's where AI can be really helpful. I'm not so bought into, the editing, the copywriting aspect of it. I will mention, like, yesterday I used AI several times where we just launched a new website, and I have people go through the website on Zoom, and then I capture the feedback using a transcripting tool called Grain. Now, Grain has their own AI, but I don't like their you can't really change the prompts. So what I do is I copy the highlight from Grain, put it into Notion, and then prompt it in a way that better surfaces the action items in the right context, right? So the context of a new website, a visitor viewing the website, and then suggesting recommendations. And that's quite helpful. Like, I don't want to be going through the whole transcript myself. And so there we are. Like, Notion AI not only does it for me, but does it in the right format, because it goes through, it understands, the differences in the blocks, and then it outlines to dos as blocks.
That's a really cool use case. It makes me think of one of the questions that I get asked a lot is what's my biggest learning from my experience working at Facebook? And the most common thing I share is that versus my startups that I was at prior, all those different hats that you wear when you're working at a small startup become entire people. And what you're talking about is that you probably don't have a dedicated user researcher, and maybe now you never need one, or at least in the short term, you have this AI user researcher who's able to do work that it would be impossible to have the time or really the know-how to do without AI there doing it for you. That's a really cool use case.
Exactly. Exactly. And speaking of questions and answers, Notion recently released a sub feature for their AI as Q&A. And basically the idea is that you can ask Notion anything, and because it's essentially effective, if done effectively, it's like a second brain, right? It has tons and tons of knowledge captured in there. You can now have a personal custom chat GPT that runs on top of the knowledge and the notes that you've taken. So that's, just I hope the description evokes some interesting use cases. But for us, in the company level, it's streamlined search to the point where I can just type in and be like a few questions that I asked in the past couple of weeks is like, oh, what's the information on our business insurance? And it would just pull up and say like, oh, okay, here's in broker, here's the policy number, here is the coverage, whatever, whatever. It's like, okay, that's cool. What does our privacy policy say about sharing screenshots of Notion workspaces of our customers? And then it gives me the answer.
That's cool. These are some really cool ways to be applying AI. Some really cool ways to use tools. We'd love to hear the flip side of that, AI or otherwise. What are some super common mistakes that you've seen product leaders make, or maybe you've made with earlier customers and you've evolved over time? What are some common mistakes that you see product leaders making right now when it comes to leading remote teams and the tools that they use to do that?
Let me tell you about this. June of last year, I was in a Beverly Hills mansion as part of LA Tech Week, and I was standing with two people. One is a investor VC, and then another guy is a founder. And when I talk about my work, people just ask some basic shit, or like, "Oh, what do you do?" or "How does this?" "How that?" They asked a very, I think, intelligent question. They're saying like, if you come across a Notion workspace and a user, and you think that their workspace is a 4 out of 5 or 4.5 out of 5, how do you make it a 5? And that's a customer that we don't come across very often. I think a lot of our customers are maybe in the 1-2 range of their proficiency with Notion. So I had to think, and I realized that the answer is in simplification. I think a lot of people that get excited, and Notion definitely scratches a specific itch for organizers or people that went, in high school. They had the binders, they had the highlights, they had color coded everything, right? Like, there's a person that loves Notion, right? I think they're just referred to Type A, right? Referred to as Type A. But the tendency there is to just go too far, is just get like, too excited and just keep building and keep optimizing and keep adding workflows and keep finding gaps in these workflows and building that it's just there is a diminishing returns, is if that's the right economic term, I believe, to just using the tools. At some point you just have to draw the line and use the workflow, and that's going to be good enough, and that is going to bring you 80% of the value that you're trying to accomplish. You don't need that, like that final bit of optimization to get the most value out of Notion. So simplifying and not over optimizing is the best advice that I would have for users who are enthusiastic about the tool.
Back to those like first time founder mistakes. It's so easy for us to get caught up in this work theater of like, it's really easy to spend an entire day, an entire week tweaking your Notion instance or your spreadsheet for X or your whatever. And you feel like you're productive. You feel like you're moving the ball forward. But it's just a time suck. It's just a distraction. And yeah, totally agree with what you're saying. That makes perfect sense that sometimes less is more. And the tool that gets out of the way, that enables you to focus on what needs to be focused next rather than becoming a focus unto itself.
Yeah. Let me add something on top of that and connect some to concept I mentioned earlier, like execution and market risk. So I feel like using tools and setting up workspaces and really like pursuing what we call like intelligent workspace design falls in the execution side of things, right? And being having been in business for 4 years, we've had clients that ran out of business, right? And for these clients, we've created magnificent Notion workspaces and really effective workflows. But these workflows ain't shit if your business fundamentally isn't in an exciting market and pursuing an exciting opportunity where you're hopefully inching towards product market fit, where you're overwhelmed with the demand. And that's sort of a really key point with this. A lot of users of the tools, whether they're product leaders or founders, are like using the tool even though they haven't met a constraint, even though they're not overwhelmed. So they're pre-optimizing. They're like, I am going to hire 10 people, and therefore I need a fantastic onboarding system. And then they spend too much on this onboarding system and maybe hire the wrong people, and then they're fucked, right? So the right approach there is to go ahead and do things that don't scale, thanks PG, but like hire those 10 people and stay up the late nights and be frustrated about that, but then create a environment where then when you have to hire 100 people, then you can figure out the workflow because there is a clear constraint that you met. But a lot of people, again, they pursue this optimization without meeting the constraint. And that is, by the way, I'm such at fault at this in my, I guess, maybe recent past, where I would like figure out this thing that needs to be feels like it needs to be optimized, but it actually doesn't. So only like improvement and growth by constraint is what I believe now.
Have you turned away clients saying like, y'all aren't ready for this yet? Like this is junk food. You're filling up on the wrong thing. You're filling up on bread. Focus on something else. You don't need this intricate Notion setup yet. Has that been a thing for you?
Yes, but it's in a less direct way, right? We like ask questions and they sometimes say the answers that basically conclude that just doesn't need to happen right now.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sure that's a tough conversation to have when you have to have it, but that's super interesting.
Yeah, and the most really important part here with like this workspace design is the right time and the right use case, right? And it's a little bit, I will say, hard to say no in a consultancy business because you grow as a result of working with yes, more clients, but the right clients, but you have to be able to say no. So
One thing I wanted to ask you about is our tools, our workflows, our processes, and how they impact our company culture. We're both tool nerds. I'm founding a company that's connecting all the apps that we use at work. Your company is all about helping people use tools better and better and optimize for the ways their teams collaborate. There's this Marshall McLuhan quote that I absolutely love that was always in the back of my head when founding GC. And it was that something along the lines of, Yeah, it's, well, read the whole book, took out one sentence. We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us. And you're a tool shaper. How does that resonate with you? Is that something that you've kept in mind as you've built the instances of Notion that you've built for your clients?
I wonder if the quote that you mentioned is, it sounds like a, sort of different reincarnation of the medium is the message, right?
Yeah,
I love this quote, by the way. I did not read the book. Sorry, Marshall.
it's
Hopefully
a
one day.
it's a rough book. I'll admit that.
Yeah, yeah, I did. It was taught to me, and then at NYU actually in a class about, I think it was sociology or something like that. I think I may go on a tangent here,
Yeah.
but I think when it comes to tools like Notion, I think in a way it's a tool for communication.
Mhm.
And communication in remote and hybrid teams, it is 100 times more important than it is in a completely on-site or in-office teams. Because as you've heard before, the analogy, right? There is no water cooler, there is no corridor conversations. These things get lost. So the serendipity of office stuff, or like how Steve Jobs said, great ideas come when people bump into each other. People don't bump into each other accidentally in Slack or in Notion or in Loom, right? Um, but that's where it connects to this quote, I think, in a way, because the expression of communication through these mediums, using the mediums communicates something, right? And you have to be, in my opinion, as a leader, whether founder or product, very intentional with what medium you pick for which message. So if you're one to believe that audio messages is the most efficient thing, and you go, air chat inspired, and you send everyone at channel audio message there, DM audio message there, this there, it communicates something that, there's a certain urgency about this, and that you expect people on their behalf to listen and like parse through your message and figure things out, right? So that sets a certain culture about how you communicate and how you get things done. In contrast, maybe, the way I do sometimes things is that when there's a big announcement, I write a draft, and then I turn that draft into a more polished document, and then I record a loom to go through that document to make sure that people kind of understand what I understand, and they're see myself speaking on video and audio, and kind of gain a certain empathy when it comes to the information that's being communicated. And by the way, the written communication also has headings, it has underlines, it has highlights, it has relevant components to make it like to make the information design, or rather the information design, make it more consumable, right? Because the idea is to get from A to B in the fastest possible way, but you have to pick the right medium to do that, and you have to be intentional about the medium.
So, what I'd love to ask is, obviously you're a huge Notion fan. What other apps have caught your attention lately? I heard an air chat drop there. We'll see if this podcast ages well and if that's popular next week, or if it's just this fleeting moment. But what other apps have you excited? Can you ever imagine a day where optimization is off Notion and onto something else?
I have a fundamental belief that any tool can do the job.
Okay, interesting.
What we do in Notion can be accomplished in Coda, can be accomplished in Google Drive, can be accomplished in Confluence, can be accomplished maybe in Jira. Each tool has a associated pain to it, right? And some level in some tools the pain is worse for an individual. In some tools the pain is worse for a collaborative setting. But really, like at the very fundamental level, I think you can get it done. I mean, you can get it done over the phone, right? Even just being on the phone for 24 hours. Obviously, that's not the best
You
thing,
can get faxes
but
out, dust those off.
exactly. You can use a walkie-talkie. So that in mind, I there's the SaaS goes through bundling and then unbundling and again and again and again, and so I can see a world where Notion becomes Microsoft over the next 20 years, and then there's a new hot tool that's better um, out there. So I can imagine that world, right? But do I believe that this will happen? Not so much, because I have a tattoo of Notion on my arm, but also I really do believe in the leadership and their vision. Like, I think Ivan, Simon, Akshay, I think they're unique founders, unique individuals, and I think the vision that they have for Notion is not even just the vision, but like the principles that they are applying in like building the company. Like, when you used to go to their about page, I don't know if they changed it. They talk about first principles of computing, how the idea for Notion came from like understanding how like old ledger books worked, and how that turned into this like refrigerator sized computers, and how that then turned into like Microsoft Excel and then Google Sheets, and it was fundamentally siloed. But Notion is taking these silos and bringing them into one all-in-one workspace. And sure, that vision is hard to like create, but like the thinking is, I think, very intelligent, and I believe in Notion. And so I think they have a bright future ahead. I think they're gonna IPO. I think they're gonna get more users than Google Workspace within the next 5 years. That's
Bold
my hot
prediction.
take.
Okay.
Um, and I love Notion, so I'll say that. Now, other tools that I'm excited about, to answer your
Yeah.
original question. Um, I am quite bullish as well on Linear. We're not a current user, but I think similar vibes I get from like looking at the founding team and seeing what they publish and seeing how they think about their work, about the product, and then the product itself. Like, we have used it. It's very different from Notion, but equally impressive in terms of its opinionation, in terms of its speed, in terms of its design, in terms of its taste, in terms of its overall functionality, and like the sum of its parts. Like, it is a great product.
It's got that same brand aesthetic story that you said was so important when you first found Notion, for sure. Linear is a great example of that.
Exactly. I will throw in one that you probably seen me championing on Twitter, but I'm really excited about this new one. It's called Attio.com, Attio. They are essentially building specific use case, the customer or CRM use case. I love on their website it says customer relationship magic. That hook, man, that is genius. But the tool itself, yes, it is a CRM, and CRM, by the way, is the biggest category in SaaS. It's ginormous. It's billions, right? Um, in terms of revenue and, well, and profit, I suppose. So why I like Attio is because it's taking a very Notion-esque approach in a way. Like, you have, for this case of working with customers or companies and people in your business, you have like databases, you have properties. They're called different names, but
Mhm.
the product is really good, and I think it really accomplished us to like run our entire sales and a bit of marketing function on there, and better than Notion, because it's a vertical use case. It's a scalpel instead of Swiss Army knife. And because for a consultancy like us, sales is our lifeblood, or sales is very important, we need a scalpel. And for too long, I think I used a Swiss Army knife, and I think that that was actually worse, and that hurt our business.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Huge fan of that too. I've been playing around with them as well. Love to ask you, looking ahead, what are you most excited about? Let's say in the next 12 months, when it comes to how you see Notion evolving, how you see other tools evolving, how you see AI impacting the way that we work. What do you think is going to impact product teams, product leaders most?
I think there is a convergence that's happening across the most popular tools. Slack has introduced Canvas, right? Sort of a document tool. Notion has acquired a file storage email company. I think a number of companies are trying to become the definitive Office, right? Take away market share from Microsoft Office and Google, who have billions of users, and people are just kind of okay with them, even though there are better and more convenient solutions. So I think the Coda founder in some interview said that there's a renaissance of like personal productivity tools and personal knowledge management. I'm excited for this to grow. I'm excited for this to spread, because one thing that I keep forgetting, and maybe you do too, is that we are in a micro bubble. That we think that like, oh, Notion is my world. Like it's it's just a few million people, technically speaking. There is so much more to be done, so much more people to get excited about it, to show the potential of these tools and get onboarded and get educated and get brought into the cult. So I think it's very early. We're still very early, and I'm just excited to see the message spread, right? Tiago Forte, the creator of Building a Second Brain and the Power Method, he wrote the book on like his methods, and this is the first book in this category, technically the first legit book in this category. But if you look at other categories, even in the self-help business, there are thousands of books, right, on like negotiation and product management and lean startup and all that. Maybe not thousands, but there's a lot more, I think, people to bring in, people to attract, people to onboard, people to get behind this movement. And I'm just excited for it to spread. Um, there's other thoughts, but I think that's the one that I'm most excited about.
It's couldn't agree with you more. It is just the beginning. We've seen the tools that we use evolve so much over, say, the last decade. Even thinking back to, I like to look at the example of design tools and how we went from using Photoshop to using Sketch to using Figma to using Canva, and the space continues to evolve, and we all keep creating better and better work because of it.
Yes. Wait, can I add about AI? Sorry.
Yeah, go for
Can
it.
I add? I think with AI, I mean, new things are just like shipping every day, right? And it becomes crazier and crazier and crazier. And I think the epiphany that I've gone through in terms of like realizing the value and really becoming a daily active user, let's call it, for ChatGPT. I think there's going to be more and more features that light up that light bulb for more and more and more people. Um, and the more people they use it, the better the models get, the faster we get to AGI, and we got then we can just let the robots take over.
Now, you are
But yeah.
certainly a thought leader in this space, and one of my favorite things about you is following you online because you have a lot to say about this stuff. Where can people follow you online and keep up with your thoughts as this space continues to evolve?
You can find me on Twitter or X at Tem and Co. So TEMNCO. I am starting a YouTube channel this
Aren't we
month
all?
of April 2024. And that YouTube channel is going to be called Temps Tools. It's going to be a personal channel where I'm going to showcase the tools that I use for work and life and play and all that. So
Awesome.
that look for Temps Tools if you're watching this in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining today, Tim. Really, really, really appreciate it. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for the thoughtful questions. Excited to keep up.